Hello everybody, this is Marisa and I am reporting and recording on behalf of Group 1. And we are covering additives in vaccinations being associated with autism and should not be administered until further study is completed on the link between these additives and autism. Autism is a developmental disorder known to affect 1 in 88 children in the United States. Some studies have linked this disorder to the exposure of children to additives present in some vaccines. There are 3 preservatives used in vaccines licensed in the United States. They are phenol, 2-phenoxyethanol, and thimerosal, which is a mercury-containing preservative. Thimerosal contains about 50% of mercury by weight. Thimerosal metabolites, ethylmercury and thiosalicylate, are also used in other drugs and biologics. And ethylmercury and methylmercury are well-established nephrotoxicants and neurotoxicants. Acute exposure to large amounts of ethylmercury has been associated with permanent neurological injury and death. For example, organic mercury encephalopathy and mercury poisoning. Several studies have shown an association between thimerosal exposure in childhood and the development of autism spectrum disorder, or ASD. In a cohort study reported by the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, or VAERS, infants vaccinated with thimerosal-containing diphtheria, tetanus, acellular pertussis, or DTaP, had a significantly increased risk in the incidence of ASD compared with children vaccinated with thimerosal-free DTaP. In a second phase of the same study, findings showed that children diagnosed with ASD were significantly more likely to have received a thimerosal-containing hepatitis B vaccine within the first 6 months of life compared with children without an ASD diagnosis. A cross-sectional study found an association between the diagnosis of autism in boys who were vaccinated as neonates with the thimerosal-containing hepatitis vaccine. This study found that boys who received the vaccine had statistically higher odds of having an autism diagnosis compared with those who were unvaccinated. And this risk was higher in non-white boys. Thimerosal exposure in early life was associated with tics in boys, but not in girls, after thimerosal exposure between birth and 7 months of age. Additionally, poor performance in speech and articulation was associated with increasing mercury exposure from birth to 28 days. Similar results were found when examining the effects of prenatal exposure to thimerosal. The neuropsychological outcome of performance in attention and executive functioning was poor in children who were exposed to higher levels of mercury in utero. A case series reported 8 children who were diagnosed with regressive ASD associated with toxic encephalopathy was induced by in utero exposure to thimerosal from maternal pertussis vaccine, maternal influenza vaccine, or maternal Rho-D immune globulin. None of these children had any other significant sources of exposure to mercury, such as the mother's diet being high in mercury, a high number of dental amalgams during pregnancy, or a mother's occupational exposure to mercury. And other causes of ASD were ruled out. Additionally, the children diagnosed with ASD were found to have high levels of mercury in their urine, feces, or hair samples. In 1997, it was recommended that infants should be vaccinated with 3 different vaccines, all of which contained thimerosal. They were DTaP, hepatitis B, and Haemophilus influenza type B. If the infant received all vaccinations, the cumulative dose of mercury would be up to 188 micrograms by the time the infant was 6 months old. This level of mercury exceeds the limit of mercury recommended by the Environmental Protection Agency. Thimerosal was removed from childhood vaccines after an amendment to the FDA Modernization Act was signed in 1997. Despite the fact that vaccines have been mercury preservative-free for over a decade now, speculation persists about vaccines previously containing mercury and links to autism. This speculation continues even after the Institute of Medicine published a conclusive report in 2004 refuting any association between vaccines and autism. That is our report and argument, so thank you for listening.